Welcome to Language Swap, everyone, a fun way to learn English. We are so excited to have you join us today.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sally. And Alex, I have to tell you about something a little embarrassing that happened to me this week.
Oh, I'm always here for embarrassing stories. Please continue.
So I met someone new at a work event, and within like 30 seconds, I completely blanked on what to say next. Just stood there smiling awkwardly like a mannequin.
We've all been there. That specific kind of silence where your brain just refuses to produce a single sentence, no matter how hard you try.
Exactly. And it made me think we did a small talk episode a while back, but today I really want to focus specifically on those first few moments of meeting someone. That very particular skill of making a good first impression before the small talk even really begins.
I love that distinction because small talk keeps a conversation going, but today is really about that opening moment, the handshake, the first exchange, the vibe you create in the first 60 seconds.
First impressions and meeting new people. How to introduce yourself well. How to remember names. How to read the room. And honestly, how to just feel less awkward in those first few moments.
And here's something we want you to walk away with today. Beyond just vocabulary, first impressions matter, but they're not permanent. You can always build on a slightly awkward start. Nobody is defined by one nervous introduction, ever.
That's such a relieving thought, honestly, because so many people carry way too much pressure into these moments, like one bad hello ruins everything that could come after it.
Let's start with the actual introduction itself, because there's real technique here beyond just saying your name and hoping for the best.
Great to meet you. Simple, warm, works in almost any situation. Slightly more natural and current than the more formal pleased to meet you, which can feel a little stiff depending on the context.
I don't think we've met. I'm Alex. A great way to introduce yourself to someone in a group setting, especially if you're not sure whether you've met before. It's low pressure and doesn't assume anything awkward if it turns out you actually had met once briefly.
I've heard so much about you. Perfect when you're meeting someone your friend or coworker has mentioned before. It signals you already have some context, which makes the interaction warmer immediately.
How do you two know each other? A fantastic go-to question when you're introduced to someone through a mutual friend. It gives the conversation an immediate direction instead of an awkward silence.
I use that one constantly. It's such a natural bridge into a real conversation. Because everyone has some story about how they met their friends, even a boring one.
Now let's talk about names, because remembering names is honestly one of people's biggest social fears in any language, in any culture.
Sorry, could you say your name again? Totally normal, totally fine to ask. Way better than pretending you remember and getting caught awkwardly later in the conversation.
Nice to meet you, Sarah. Using someone's name right after they say it actually helps you remember it, and it also makes the other person feel individually acknowledged, not just generically greeted.
That's such a good tip. Repeating the name back immediately does double duty. It's polite, and it genuinely helps your memory lock it in almost instantly.
Remind me of your name? A softer, more casual version for when you've met before but genuinely forgot, much better than avoiding using their name for the whole conversation out of embarrassment.
I did that once for an entire dinner party, just avoided saying anyone's name because I'd forgotten half of them. It was exhausting, honestly, way more effort than just asking.
That sounds like a genuinely stressful evening. Asking really is so much easier than the elaborate avoidance dance.
Now, let's move into how to actually keep the introduction going once the initial hello happens, because that first sentence is often the easy part.
So what brings you here? A classic, versatile opener for any event, party, or gathering. It works because it invites the other person to share context about themselves naturally.
Have you been to one of these before?
Great for events, conferences, or gatherings because it opens the door to talking about the event itself, which is neutral, shared territory.
What do you do? A very common question, though. It's worth knowing it can feel a little narrow if used too early. Pairing it with something else keeps the conversation from feeling like an interview.
That's such an important nuance. What do you do alone can feel transactional, but what do you do and do you enjoy it opens up something more genuine immediately.
I love your energy. A warm, genuine compliment that works especially well at the start of a conversation because it's about how someone makes you feel, not just how they look.
Now, let's talk about reading the room, because first impressions aren't only about what you say, They're also about noticing the environment and adjusting accordingly to it.
If the setting is loud and energetic, matching that energy helps you connect. If it's quiet and more reserved, coming in too loud can actually create distance instead of closeness.
I don't want to interrupt, but a respectful way to enter an existing conversation without barging in. It shows awareness of the group dynamic already happening before you arrived.
Mind if I join? Very direct, very simple, and it works because it explicitly asks permission instead of assuming space in the conversation that already exists.
I want to share a story here, actually. I once walked into a group conversation way too enthusiastically, super loud energy, big laugh, and the whole group kind of went quiet for a second.
Oh no, what happened next after that?
I just recalibrated. I lowered my energy to match theirs, asked a simple question instead of leading with a big statement, and the conversation actually opened back up within a minute.
That's such a great example of adjusting in real time instead of doubling down on an approach that clearly wasn't landing with that particular group.
Exactly. And that flexibility is honestly more valuable than any specific opening line. Reading the room and adjusting is a skill in itself, separate from vocabulary entirely.
Now, let's talk about what happens when the conversation gets a tiny bit awkward, because it happens to literally everyone, no matter how socially confident they usually are.
This is a bit random, but a great way to introduce an unexpected question or topic without it feeling jarring. This is a bit random, but have you tried the food here yet?
I'm probably overthinking this, but a humble, honest way to acknowledge a slightly awkward moment without making it a bigger deal than it needs to be.
Well, this got interesting. A lighthearted way to acknowledge an unexpected turn in conversation, often used with humor rather than discomfort.
I love using humor to diffuse those small, awkward moments. It shows self-awareness without making everyone feel like the moment needs to be urgently fixed or explained.
There's also a specific situation worth mentioning, meeting someone again after you've clearly forgotten meeting them the first time. That one is particularly cringe-inducing for a lot of people.
Oh, that's such a specific kind of dread. You can see it in their face. They remember you clearly, and you're just quietly panicking, trying to figure out where you know them from.
I'm so sorry. Remind me where we met? Honest, direct, and honestly the fastest way out of that particular panic. Most people are genuinely understanding about this.
You'll have to forgive me. I'm terrible with names, but I never forget a face. A slightly playful way to acknowledge the gap without it feeling like a rejection of the person.
I think people appreciate honesty here way more than awkward pretending. Nobody actually enjoys watching someone fake recognition badly.
Now, let's talk about ending a first meeting well, because closing a conversation gracefully is just as important as opening one, maybe even more so.
It was really great meeting you. Warm, genuine, always appropriate. You can add specifics too. It was really great meeting you. I loved hearing about your trip.
Let's stay in touch. Simple and common, though it's most meaningful when followed by an actual next step, like exchanging contact information right then and there.
I'd love to continue this conversation sometime. A more intentional closing line for when you genuinely want to see someone again, not just a polite formality to end things nicely.
Can I get your number? Or are you on social media? Direct but casual. And honestly, the most practical way to actually follow through on wanting to stay connected with someone.
I want to add one more thought here before we move to the word tour. First impressions genuinely matter less than people think in the long run of a real relationship.
That's such a comforting thing to remember. The friendships and relationships that matter most rarely hinge on one perfect first conversation. They're built over many small moments afterward, not one flawless beginning.
So if your first hello is a little clumsy, or you blank on someone's name, or the energy feels a bit off at first, it's genuinely not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of one.
I think that's honestly the most freeing thing anyone can hear before walking into a room full of strangers. The pressure to be perfect immediately just isn't necessary, or even realistic.
Exactly. And honestly, some of the best relationships I have started with genuinely awkward first meetings that we still laugh about years later.
I want to add one more category before we wrap up, because it comes up constantly now. Meeting people online before meeting them in person, whether that's professionally or socially.
That's such a relevant addition. The dynamic is a little different when you've already exchanged messages before an actual face-to-face meeting.
It's so nice to finally meet you in person. A perfect opener for exactly that situation. You've talked online and now you're meeting for real. It acknowledges the existing connection while marking this as a new kind of moment.
You're exactly how I imagined. Playful and warm, though it works best when said genuinely, not as an empty compliment. People can usually tell the difference.
I feel like I already know you. A lovely way to bridge an online relationship into an in-person one, especially after a lot of messaging or video calls beforehand.
I actually experienced this recently. I'd been messaging a potential collaborator for weeks, and when we finally met at a conference, that phrase came out completely naturally, and it just eased any tension immediately.
That's such a good example. The words matched the reality of the relationship already in progress, so it landed as authentic instead of forced or rehearsed.
One more useful one for this specific situation. The profile picture really doesn't do you justice. Lighthearted, complimentary, and it acknowledges the slightly strange modern experience of knowing someone's face before knowing their voice or mannerisms.
That one always gets a laugh. It's such an honest observation about how strange online to offline meetings can feel at first, in a good way.
These phrases matter more every year, honestly, as more relationships start online before they start in person, whether that's dating, business, or even just making friends through shared interests.
One last thought before we close out the main content. I think the real skill behind all of today's vocabulary isn't memorizing perfect lines. It's genuinely being curious about the person in front of you.
That's such a good point to end on. Every phrase we covered today works better when it comes from real interest in someone, not just as a script to get through the awkward part.
The words are just tools. The curiosity is what actually makes someone feel welcomed and interesting to talk to, regardless of which exact phrase you choose in the moment.
And that's honestly good news, because you don't have to memorize this episode perfectly. You just have to remember to be a little curious, and the right words tend to show up when you need them.
It reminds me of something my grandmother used to say. Actually, she said the secret to talking to anyone is just asking one honest question and then really listening to the answer.
That's such simple, timeless advice. All of today's phrases are really just different ways of doing exactly that. Opening a door and genuinely wanting to hear what's on the other side of it.
And that's genuinely the note I want to end this section on. First impressions aren't about performance. They're about presence, showing up genuinely curious, and letting the conversation unfold from there. All right, let's do our word tour for today, covering everything we talked about.
Introducing yourself. Great to meet you. I don't think we've met. I'm Sally. I've heard so much about you. How do you two know each other?
Handling names? Sorry, could you say your name again? Using someone's name right after they say it. Remind me of your name?
Keeping it going. So, what brings you here? Have you been to one of these before? What do you do and do you enjoy it? I love your energy.
Reading the room, I don't want to interrupt, but mind if I join? Matching the energy of the group instead of overpowering it entirely.
Handling awkward moments. This is a bit random, but I'm probably overthinking this, but, well, this got interesting. And for forgotten introductions, I'm so sorry. Remind me where we met?
Ending well, it was really great meeting you. Let's stay in touch. I'd love to continue this conversation sometime. Can I get your number? Or are you on social media?
And for online to in-person meetings, it's so nice to finally meet you in person. I feel like I already know you. The profile picture really doesn't do you justice. Your challenge this week, introduce yourself to one new person, even briefly, and use at least 2 of today's phrases. Notice how having the language ready lowers the pressure of the moment significantly.
And remember, the goal isn't a perfect first impression. It's just an honest, warm opening to something that might become real over time.
If today's episode helped you feel a little more prepared for those first moments, sharing it with someone who gets nervous meeting new people too would mean a lot to us.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Go make a new connection today. We'll see you in the next episode.